Hey everybody. Um, I hosted the Kansas City Revit and Python Meetup group earlier this week. It was on Friday, or actually, it was Saturday morning, so yesterday. Um, and it was just on, kind of an introduction to get to know the group. Only a couple people showed up, but it was nice because got a software developer and a building auditor, so it was an interesting group, and I learned quite a bit, and I was able to show them quite a bit as well. But I forgot to record it. The idea is that I'm going to record everything so that they could reference it and other people could use it as well. So I'm going to briefly kind of go back over it. A lot of the things I'm not going to touch because um, they both had now they did not their knowledge wasn't they didn't fully understand Python or Revit in the context that I wanted to use it in. I know one guy didn't understand BIM to the fullest, so I kind of talked about that for quite a while. But I'm going to make the assumption that we kind of got an idea. I'll briefly touch on it and then kind of go on from there. But I won't go in as much depth as I did in that meeting. So to get started, introduction, what the heck is BIM and ML? If you don't know BIM, building information modeling, or in some cases, management, or, manager, whatever. And it's just a process and leveraging different technologies and stuff, and kind of the design and construction process of a building and operations as well. Machine learning is kind of machine learning from data and then using to make predictions and things like that. So to get into it, the first slide is kind of the tools. So I will be recording these, and the idea is that you can kind of follow along, and I'll share everything as well. I'm still trying to figure those things out if I'm going to use GitHub or something. Right now everything's on OneDrive, and that seems easy enough. So the tools themselves, we're going to use Revit. What version? I don't think is a big deal. It should be fine as long as it's kind of up to date. Python 3, Jupyter Notebook, and Scikit-learn. Scikit-learn's a package that ties into Python, and it's used for machine learning. And we may use some other packages as well, like Pandas and NumPy, but we'll kind of get to that when we do. Some of these things I'm still learning myself. As a database, kind of to work with our data, we're going to use Microsoft Access to at least get the Revit data. But when we get into Jupyter Notebooks, we'll probably be leveraging just a CSV file or something from just, we can create a data frame in there and we can manipulate it however we want. And if you're not familiar with Jupyter Notebooks, it's just a nice way to view your code. You can break it down, you can add visuals, you can update just certain blocks. It's really easy to understand. It's just a nice way to talk about and, work with code. And a good way to get all of this is if you go out to the Anaconda distribution. It will, when you download that, it will actually get you Python 3, where you can run it in Jupyter Notebooks, and then you should have all the necessary packages. I mean, you'll have Scikit-learn, but you'll also have NumPy, Pandas, and a number of other ones as well. So, real quick, well, actually, that will be posted below, so just go through there, and you'll see the resources, and I've posted the link to the Anaconda website where you can actually get that. And you should be good. Like, if you have to worry about admin rights, it's not a problem. When it gets installed, it will prompt you if you wanted Visual Studio. You can say no to that, and then you should be able to install it without admin rights, and then you're good to go to use it. When you run Jupyter Notebooks, it opens it up in a browser, and then you can run the code, and you can open up my notebooks and use them as well. So, what is BIM? So essentially, data. That's more or less what I like to refer to it as. It's essentially one big database, and that's kind of what we're going to be working on within this process for machine learning. And the idea is to leverage that data to predict and to kind of aid through the design process. So, there's for the most part, BIM is kind of used in the building, AEC, world, and it's an entire process, as you see over here in this picture. We have design, build, and operate, and kind of starting with conceptual design, you go to documentation, to construction and logistics, renovation, and then so on. So it's a whole process through the whole life cycle of a building, and again, it's just data essentially, of that building. And what is Revit? So parametric design tool, modeling software, information, pretty much data again. Revit isn't BIM itself, but it's a tool within the process, and it creates a lot of that data that we're going to leverage for machine learning. So some BIM acronyms in software, if you're not familiar. So we have VDC, virtual design and construction. For the most part, you'll see that kind of used in the construction industry. BIM, you'll see that used in design and construction world. LOD, level of development, kind of talking about how much information and modeling is being done on the specific elements within your model. So how far you want to take it. If you just want it as simple lines or detailed model elements, you would specify that with an LOD. Software, so Revit, modeling software, Navisworks, model viewer, clash detection tool, and animations. Also, a coordination tool. It's primarily used in the construction world, but it's also used in design as well. Revit is primarily used in design, but there is a lot of firms, construction firms, that use it as well, but they have a variety of software that they would leverage too. Assemble, which is a model quantity takeoff software. Autodesk just bought it, so it ties really well into working with models. AutoCAD and P9D, which are, AutoCAD P9D is a P9D software, but plain AutoCAD is just a drafting tool. You can do some 3D stuff in there as well, but typically in the AEC world, that was the tool that a lot of folks used, at least in North America. BIM 360 is a team collaboration tool. This is an awesome tool that ties in with using Revit. You can host other types of documents up there as well, but some of the strong benefits is the fact that you can host your Revit model, turn on work sharing, and then you have the ability to sync and save a lot quicker. You can open those models practically anywhere and not have any issues with them. So it's a really nice way to collaboratively work on a Revit model. So what is machine learning? It learns, essentially it's a machine that it learns and improves from experience without being explicitly programmed. To give you an idea, if we needed to, so the premise of this meetup is to essentially get to the point where we can predict certain things, like what type of families are typically in these, whatever type of room, and if that, is correlated with the type of building as well. So we can look at all these different things, what type of templates that we would typically use for these types of jobs, just to kind of predict those things. And if we had to explicitly program every aspect of that could be tens of thousands of lines of code. And even then, we wouldn't be able to touch all the different variables or understand the complexities behind, what could be correlated with what. So essentially, we leverage the data that we have with our models to essentially have the machine learn from, so that it can predict for us. And then it doesn't require us to code out 1,000 lines of code. We can do them pretty easy, depending on the complexity of the problem. So how is ML used? So there's regression, which is kind of cool, and linear regression's a pretty popular one that's used, and it's mostly used when you have something simple as like two things that are correlated with one another, like height and weight, which is generally correlated with each other. If you're taller, then you may weigh more, and you can see those things plotted on a chart pretty easily. And then you would have a line placed on there, and then doing the math, try to put that line where it's the least amount away from each point on that chart. And it's pretty cool. ML is, you can use, there's some models out there that do that. There's classification, prediction as well, finding the hidden structures of data and creating intelligent AI. Classification is cool. Prediction is essentially what we're going to try to do. And each of these things you can take a look at and kind of read more into. But the idea is that we're going to take it to the point where we can predict the future of to try to predict what is going to happen with these buildings, or based off of the program, what it is that we're going to generate, or trying to predict a specific room type or families or templates that need to be generated for these projects. And again, more or less working with that Revit data. So process, we're going to look at the business understanding. And that's going to be the practical side of this. Is this something usable? Is this something that is scalable and makes sense, for us to leverage? Data understanding, data preparation. We need to understand the data itself, work with it, really try to look at the different categories and things like that. Then data preparation, get it ready, clean up the data. So a lot of times we'll have to simplify it so that we can optimize the machine learning model as much as possible without also, destroying it and not getting that accuracy in there. Modeling, and then evaluation, and then deployment. So goal, predict building type, predict rooms and furniture, predict templates, predict teams, and so on, pretty much. I mean, the idea is that this will grow into a variety of different things, but to start off as simple as possible, having those models, and if you've been working with Revit for some time, then you have you have a history of databases that you can work with. I mean, that's essentially, you've been tracking all that information this entire time. So now we can use it for analytics, we can use it for predictions, we can use it in a variety of different ways. And the idea isn't to necessarily replace anybody, but to use this as a design assist tool to make predictions, to be more prepared, be more proactive when we're working on projects. So that's it, really. If you have any questions or anything like that about this process, then you can let me know. But the idea is that we're gonna, kind of first get the data. We want to understand it. We need to prepare it and kind of work through that, and then we'll get into machine learning and working with some different models in there. And the idea is hopefully we get to a point where we can predict building types and room, furniture, and templates, and so on. And we can, try to optimize and, effectively use this tool and the data that we have. So this is going to be a kind of iterative process. I'll learn some new things, getting feedback from other folks as well in the way that we, want to approach this. So feel free to comment, ask any questions if you have any. And hopefully you learned something. And I'll be sharing all this, the PowerPoint and everything else, so that you guys can take it and use it however way you want. But I appreciate you taking the time to watch this. Thanks a lot.